Hopefully you got a tag. Yep, we're live. All right, they're on here. Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Oh, I see y'all getting on here now. All right, they're coming in. Come on in the room, Saints. Come on in the room. All right, they're on here. Yeah. All right. Hey, Keisha. Hey, Barbara. Hey, Lewis. Hey, Phyllis. Hey, Crystal. Hey. What's up? Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Worship. Today's going to be an awesome day. We're here with some awesome pastors. That's going on. Y'all know what I say, man. Let's make Jesus famous. Let's take worship worldwide. Hit that share button. Put it all out around the world. Let's go. We're going to talk about some awesome things, but we are talking today about pastors and their expectations of worship leaders. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that as well as we expound. But share this, man. Tag some worship leaders. I'm going to tag some. I know that for a fact. Tag some pastors that need to be talking about this kind of stuff, man. Get them on here. Let's talk. You guys also have the opportunity to participate. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. And I'd love to hear from you guys, maybe your thoughts on things, maybe a comment about what somebody says. But definitely put it in here. We definitely want to hear from you guys and talk to you guys and hear what you guys have to say, man. But we're going to have a good time. So I've got three awesome pastors here who I brought in and are going to be talking about this subject with me. We're going to go around real quick and let them introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Pastor Cortez. Go ahead. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're at and all that stuff.
What's up, everybody? Pastor Cortez Williams. I'm out of St. Petersburg, Florida. Gideon's Army Ministries. Young ministry, but growing, a lot of energy. I think a few weeks ago, you actually interviewed our worship leader, Minister Phyllis Wong. And so I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to discuss. I'm excited to talk. And I'm excited to produce some type of growth or knowledge for the people today.
Awesome. Pastor RJ.
Hey, everybody. My name is RJ Stevenson. I get the privilege to pastor here at New St. Paul AME Church over in Tampa, Florida, in the Northview Hills community. I'm originally from North Carolina, got here by way of Arkansas. I'm a church planter by nature, and my whole life has been all about music. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to share about my perspectives on music ministry and the pastoral relationship.
Awesome. Pastor Forrest.
Hey, what's up, y'all? So I'm Pastor Forrest, a church planter as well. We were supposed to launch this October, but due to COVID and all that, we're going to launch virtually. We're going to do an online launch. And so I am great to be here. I'm actually an intern pastor as well with Crossover Church. So I get to talk and see Darnel on a regular basis and ask him really dumb questions about worship and, helping me build a healthy worship team. So here we are, man. I'm ready to add whatever I can add and learn whatever I can learn.
Awesome.
Thanks, Darnel, for doing this.
Yeah. So I did this on purpose. I've got three young brothers on here. And you heard, so I knew that Reverend Stevenson was a church planter as well. You see they coming for your garden, bro. Hydroponic garden behind you. That's our children.
It's the Garden of Miracles. We're launching it on Sunday, and it's going to be it's a community garden that'll provide a sustainable nutrition source. My church happens to be in a food desert. So one of the things I wanted to do over here is become the solution to the problems in our community. And this is our first launch out of our reestablishment of our nonprofit organization here in the community.
That's dope. That's what's
up.
So, Pastor Cortez, Gideon, tell me the name of your church again.
Gideon's Army Ministries.
Gideon's Army Ministry. Did you start Gideon's Army Ministries?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
It's a church plant under the greater organization of the Church of Living God, Jewel Dominion. But I'm the church planting founding pastor. Yes.
This is awesome. So This is good connection right here between all y'all.
Yeah, it is, man. We got to find a way to all connect.
Yeah, I knew it. There's a good connection and everything in here. So, Pastor Cortez, how long have you been pastoring?
I started pastoring. I was very young. I was 19, 2009, and I started off in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Awesome.
I was fresh out of the military, and my overseer, we didn't have a church in Virginia at the time, and so I jumped in into the pastoral role. Had been helping other areas of ministry for the organization, supporting other churches getting planted, getting developed, and it was my turn. So,
awesome. Pastor Stevenson, how long have you been pastoring now?
A whole lot longer than I thought the Lord was gonna tell me to. I've been pastoring in ministry since 2008. I initially launched the Infinity Church as a non-denominational church in Knightdale, North Carolina. In 2012, the AME Church pulled me over to Arkansas to launch a contemporary AME church under the same brand name, the Infinity AME Church in Conway, Arkansas. In 2017, I had the opportunity to come here to serve as the executive pastor over at Allen Temple AME Church here in Tampa. And this past October 2019, Bishop Adams Jefferson Richardson allowed me to come and serve the people here at New St. Paul AME Church. And I am happy, glad, excited.
Awesome. And Forrest, you the young buck.
Yeah, I'm a young buck, man. You know, so just give you a quick history. I've been in church leadership for, I'd say, about 20 years. Most of you probably know of the late Zachary Chins. I was there for about 12 years. I came about a year after they kind of started. So I came in the infancy stage before it became the monstrosity that it once was. I stayed there about 10, 11 years, and then I left, and I joined the Kingdom Church. The youth pastor at New Destiny left to start his church, Pastor David Chalk. And so God led me to go there and assist him. And I actually just left him. We just had lunch. So, yeah, I stayed there for about another 10 years. One of the ministers there, I mean, I was probably his right-hand guy for the last 8, 9 years. Wherever you've seen him, you saw me. So he poured a lot into me, and we just felt like it was time for me to launch a church. And I'm launching under Stadia. Stadia is one of the largest church planting organizations in the country. And so, yeah, we had to go through a whole 6 months vetting and analysis and all that stuff, all these tests and all that. So we actually made it through that, thank God. And so, yeah, God called us to Tampa. So here we are. Had no idea all this stuff was going to happen once we go here. But
got it.
Here we are.
So the initial question is, as pastors, you've got pastors who've been pastoring for a little bit longer, everything. You've got pastor who is looking to launch as well. What are your expectations of your worship leader? I'm gonna start with Bishop. I'll call it Bishop Cortez. There we go. All right. I'm gonna start with Pastor Cortez. What are your expectations of your worship? This is great because your worship leader is watching, so this is beautiful. What are your expectations of a worship leader? I would say of your worship leader, but I would hope that the expectations of your worship leader is the same expectations you have of worship leaders. So give us, what is your expectations of a worship leader?
I would have to say the first expectation of a worship leader is a life, right? The life you live, your representation of Christ, your representation of the kingdom in your everyday life. What are you showing forth? What is radiating from the inside out? I've been in a situation where worship leaders were unauthentic. They were living double lives, and I'll be honest, in that season, I was living double lives, and it made a big mess. So one of my first things is you have to have the life, right? You have to be living just the same as a pastor. If I'm preaching and I'm teaching about something, I need to be living what I'm preaching and teaching about. Well, as a worship leader, I need you to live what you sing about. I need worship to be your lifestyle and your relationship to be your lifestyle. And then the second thing that's probably most important to me is, I would say, authenticity, right? Being true to who you are. Let your energy, your personality, your heart show forth when you open your mouth to minister, when you open your mouth to lead the people, and whatever energy you give, if you're authentic in your worship, whatever your authentic nature is, you'll notice that the church in itself will begin to take form of that nature, of that energy. For instance, before our worship leader came to us, I was leading praise and worship, and although I sing a little bit, I'm just not a natural born worship leader. But then when she came and began to sing, literally, she's extremely, extremely energetic person. And so our entire worship service took on that energy, that spirit. And so those are the two things that I look first and foremost. Are you living a life? And then can you be authentic? I don't want somebody that I see on TV. I want you to be who God designed you, your own fingerprint, who God designed you to be.
That's awesome. All right, Reverend Stevenson, what you got?
Oil. Need for you to have some oil on your life. I know that we hear popular songs on the radio. I know that church has become all about praise breaks. But I need for a worship leader, even in a Methodist context, I need for that worship leader to have oil on your life. I need for your preparation and presentation of ministry to be indicative that you have made a lifestyle out of getting into God's presence so that you can carry other people into a place that they don't get to go into on a familiar basis. I need to know that you've learned the words to the song, because only in understanding the message of a song can you really present the spirit of a song. I need to know that you're willing to be a part of the culture of the church. I don't need you coming in to sing nice songs, but I need for people to know that at the end of the day, that you're willing to be an intercessor. At the end of the day, you're willing to be a giver. At the end of the day, I want the young people to want to follow your example, because when you lift your hands to lead them in worship, you first got to have a relationship with folks. It doesn't need to be a situation where you get on the stage to perform, but we're looking at your lifestyle. So that means that anything that you do at any time that you do, I should be able to cross-reference that to who you say you are. And like Pastor Cortez said, you got to be authentic to me so I can experience your oil.
That's good. That's good. What you got, Pastor Forrest?
I would say, first of all, I'm looking for someone who's not trying to be the star, because Jesus is the star. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of time we hire people, or we look at people's talent, but we don't look at the anointing, like he said, the oil, the anointing that's on their life. So for me, I would want somebody who has my spirit, who actually catches the vision of the church, because I've seen it, as weird as it may sound, I've only been a part of mega churches, right? So I've only seen from a mega perspective. And a lot of times when you get these guys, I'm using the platform to build my own, right? And so that's very important to me, is that you're here because God called you there. You have a relationship, and it's not just a job. I've met too many worship leaders that they have no connection to the church. It's just a job. It's just a paycheck. So for me, I would want somebody who has my spirit, has the spirit of the church. And even though you can build your platform off of my platform, but that's not the focus of why you're there, right? Someone who can usher you in and who won't get mad when they don't get to lead the song, right? How they engage with others on the team. That's very important to me, because if you're the one that's always singing, then it's about you. You want to be the star, right? And I think we've seen enough of that, because we're in this personality-driven age, right? And so I think that's one of the things that have hurt the church. Because any church you talk to, where's the number one problem at? On the praise and worship team, right? So it just seems like there's always confusion and commotion, and it's always, and there's not a lot of, crossover is a little different, because you have a very cohesive team. But that's not the story at a lot of churches. I think for me, it would be making sure that it's somebody who's willing to build a cohesive team and move as one unit.
Gotcha. Sounds good. You guys all sound really good. The fact of the matter is that though we are all the part of the body of Christ, we all have different churches. And believe it or not, a lot of people don't want to acknowledge this or anything. There's a different culture in a lot of different churches. It's just a different culture of a lot of churches. As much as, I'm gonna be honest with you, Pastor Stevenson, my first worship leading job was at an AME church. I was a minister of music at Allen Chapel Daytona Beach for about 5 years, and then went to Bethel AME Church in DeLand for about another 3 years. So my first 8 years of leading worship as a profession was at an AME church. I knew in the AME church that what I now do at Crossover would not work in the AME church. And so it's literally, as a worship leader, being able to understand, and as much as I was still being myself, I was still able to bring what the gifts that God gave me to the culture and make sure it fit the culture of the church. And vice versa. I was able to take what I learned at the AME church to a Crossover, who is known as a hip hop church, but we ain't a hip hop church. We just use the but I was able to take those things and infuse it all together. So, I think it's very important for worship leaders, like you all said, to be yourself, but to be able to adapt. There is nothing wrong with being able to adapt. And the big thing with worship leaders is a lot of worship leaders, many of us are artists as well. And so as the artist, there is that part of me as I want to be myself, but wherever I get invited to, I need to be able to adapt. Here's Darnel, but if you invite me to the Catholic Church, what can Darnel do with the Catholic Church to still fit that culture and still be Darnel? So I think that part's very important. We have a question. Yeah, guys, if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll talk about them and everything as well. Our worship leaders, you know what? I'm going to get to this question. I want to ask another question. I want to go into this thing. I read this article today. I'm going to try to pull it up real quick so that people they can see it. I read this article today. I don't know if you guys can see it. Can you see it there? Okay. So I read this article today. It came out on churchleaders.com. It says why we need worship pastors, not worship leaders. Very, it didn't go too deep, and I understood the title is obviously what captured me and what grabbed me. But there were four different things here. So if anybody ever goes, you can go on my page actually below this video, and I put the link there. It's an interesting read, great read, why we need worship pastors and not worship leaders. I want to talk about that for a little bit. I want to get your opinion. You are pastors. Is there a difference between worship leaders and worship pastors? And if there are, give me some examples. Who wants to go first? It's all right. We can be real. This is all real stuff in here.
I can talk about it because in the context of the AME church, as you know, Darnell, a worship leader even is a completely different thing than the concept that we're talking about right now.
True.
In the Methodist tradition, a worship leader is the individual who sort of serves as the moderator or the person who's the MC. That's the person that stands up and says who's going to read the scripture, who's going to lead the invocation. They're sort of responsible for worship flow. And really, a lot of times, they don't even really lead you into worship. They sort of fulfill their task on the program and then sit down, and it just goes. It's sort of like a placeholder at times.
Yeah. So let me ask you, as a person, not even necessarily representing the AME church, although you have to at what you do you believe that there's a difference between a worship leader and a worship pastor? Is there a difference, and are there worship pastors?
Well, let me first say that I've always been allowed to be authentic somehow. I've always been allowed to be exactly who RJ is, from a Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ background to a non-denominational Pentecostal stream background into a Methodist context. And I've never changed who I am or how I worship God or how my expression is based on the denomination I serve. It's God putting exactly who I am into a place to jointly fit me for kingdom business, okay? I think that using terminology can often get us locked into semantics without formulating function. So back in the day, we had a choir, then we had a praise team. Now we got worship leaders, and now we have worship pastors. And though I think that there has been a significant evolution in music ministry and how we present that in terms of the arts, I don't think that a lot of times we give gravity to the definition of what we call people. It's almost the same thing where back in the day, a pastor who had been pastor for 5 years could go upgrade his business card and become a bishop. Now they became overseers, then they became apostles. Now they're archbishops. Now they're metropolitan bishops. And at the end of the day, if you're serving your church from the pulpit and you're the leader, you're nothing more than priest. All those other things define a function that the people don't always even see. So we get caught up in what we call something without looking at the form and function. To me, a pastor is a shepherd. To me, a pastor is a person that not only leads people, but a worship pastor would be a person that leads people in worship. How do you do that? Well, that means that one, you got to be the person who's willing to go and get the one, even when the 99 are often the ones that hold your attention. That means that you got to be innovative enough to keep everybody grabbed. You got to have a good mix of hymns and a good mix of contemporary. You got to be able to minister to the young ones and the old ones.
So you're saying, though, that you believe that there are worship leaders and worship pastors.
Definitely. I believe it. I believe that.
That's what I want. That's what I want.
Okay.
Pastoring takes a different level of commitment than leading. Pastoring says that you're not just singing a song on a stage, but you are also compared with the issues of that individual's heart.
Got you. That's what I wanted. Good. Pastor Cortez, what do you got?
I agree that there can be both. I truly believe in being a church planter and a mission pastor, that the development of what you have or the choice of what you have, whether you have a leader or a pastor, truly depends on the type of ministry you have and then also the size of the ministry you have. I will say I agree with Pastor Stevenson that a pastor is a little bit different than a leader, right? When you look at most churches, they have a general board of elders, a general board of deacons. Those are leaders. But a pastor guards and protects. You look at David. David was a shepherd, right? We hear about before he faces Goliath, he has to tell them secret things like, I fought a lion and I fought a bear to protect my sheep, and y'all didn't know about that. So a pastor is a guardian. A pastor is a teacher. A pastor is a cultivator, right? They take people from conception to birth. And so if one desires, or if you are calling someone a worship pastor, I think my big question will be, what have you cultivated, right? What fruit have you produced behind your worship? We look at great worshipers in the word, and I have to go back to David, right? David had a gift of music, and David was a worshiper pure at heart. And so his music ministry was so profound that when Saul was tormented with demons, the heart of David, the hands of David playing the harp to remove those demons, right? So I think we have to, as senior pastors, we have to understand before we even put a title, because one can come and say, I'm the type of pastor, I don't care where you come from, you're going through training with me. Hey man, I hear where you came from. That's nice. You got I see the credentials, but let's walk through this thing, because I need to know where you are, because you can come to me and say that you're a worship pastor, but for the past 5 years, all you've been doing is orchestrating a rehearsal and getting up and singing on Sundays. And you haven't really cultivated anyone. Nobody's really been delivered in the worship service. There no chains have been broken in the midst of your works, right? And so I think more so, it depends on where a person is in their walk. Not saying that they can't be developed or groomed, or they can't grow to be a pastor. But I just think, any of the fivefold callings to be applied to anything requires evidence of the Spirit, and there is fruit of the Spirit, right? There's evidence behind it. And so the difference between...
So you believe, though, that there's worship leaders and there's worship pastors?
Yeah. There are two. There's two. They're both there, but the difference is the evidence, the spiritual evidence behind it, because if you're going to be a pastor, that's a calling of the fivefold, that's a calling of the Spirit, and so there has to be evidence of the Spirit or fruit of the Spirit behind that.
All right, Forrest, what you got?
All right, I ain't gonna go that deep as y'all, but let me just say this. I think it's all in the context of culture, right? So I have more of a non-denominational background where I don't think you would see that much of a difference between a worship leader and a worship pastor, right? It's just, in some cultures, it's just really a play on words. But if I was to go deeper into it, yes, I think a pastor goes that extra mile, right? He's going to go, like you say, he's going to leave that 99 to reach that one. But I think it's all shaped by culture, because culture shapes how we interpret scripture, how we look at scripture, how we look at praise and worship, how we look at everything that we face in the church. I don't care what you say. Church culture is shaped by the framework in which you was brought up in. So the way you see it, if you're in a more historical denomination background, it's going to be pretty much totally opposite how, for the most part, how a non-denominational person would view it. So for me, I would say there is a difference, but I think it's a very slim, fine line, because I've seen where you've seen someone called a worship pastor or a worship leader, and I'm not sure the church has really defined what the difference is. So yeah, it could be a difference, but I think it's
let me
very
stop
slim.
right there, because to be 100% honest with you, that's where I'm going. I don't think the church has done a good enough job, and if you read this article, I don't think the church has done a good enough job of defining what it is, and then not only defining what it is, holding the person accountable to what it is. So I in some way and form, I agree with all of y'all. So here's the worship leader, okay? Here's the worship leader side of this. I'm the worship leader. I'm gonna tell y'all, I'm a worship pastor. I don't care whether you call me that or not. I'm a worship pastor. To me, the difference between a worship leader and a worship pastor has everything to do with outside the Sunday worship experience and the Tuesday night rehearsal. You want to find out who's a worship leader and who's the worship pastor, watch their life outside of the Sunday morning worship experience and outside of rehearsal. Because the moment you only put the responsibility, the moment you only put what they have to do, the requirements, and we put it in this box of Sunday morning, church setting, then you miss the whole entire point. Pat, I'm learning. I'm not saying I'm a pastor of a church. Let me tell you something. I have to pastor this team. And when I pastor this team, I'm not pastoring them on Sunday morning. In Sunday morning, I'm leading them in worship. And on Tuesday night, I don't have to pastor these people. I have to lead them in rehearsal. I have to teach songs and everything. Now, Monday morning, when they go to work and they going through some stuff, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, kids is acting up, family's acting up, they're not getting along with spouses and everything, and they calling you, you got the pastor. So I think that we've kind of missed this. There's this kind of thing. Now, I will 100% agree that I think that there are titles being just thrown out there. You'll see if you look for a job and go on Indeed.com and you look for the title, it says they're interviewing for worship pastor. And so if the person gets a job, they just the worship pastor. I'm like, that ain't no worship pastor. They're a good worship leader, but they ain't no worship pastor. So I think that they're missing that. I do believe that we do need more worship pastors. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with worship leaders, but I 100% believe that we need more worship pastors. As a person who's getting up in front of people, leading people in worship, except for obviously, like Pastor Stevenson said, in the AME church, I didn't have to pastor nobody. I was just a moderator. I was literally reading stuff down the line and doing all this kind of stuff, lining the hymn, and everything. I wasn't pastoring nobody. That was just the job of what it was. But in some of these other environments where there is literally a 20, 30-minute worship experience that happens, that turns into encounter, then 100% yes. You've got those people who can lead worship like, oh my God, they're a great worship leader. But the moment they get off the stage, you don't see them again. They don't go into the lobby to talk to people. They're not people oriented and everything. They don't even get a chance to pastor because they are just caught up on just that. So I think that's the big part. But I mean, I'm glad that we all understood that. I'm glad that we're all on the same page that yes, there are worship leaders and there are worship pastors. Yeah, Pastor Stevenson.
I want to be careful that we don't unleash torment on some young person that has never been a minister of music, can't show up on time for rehearsal, and tomorrow now wants to seek a job called worship pastor because we've identified for them a new title. Because that's how this happens. We find out how the new elevated term is, and we would have jumped in that lane. I think that that evolving church structures where we see more churches being multi-staff has allowed us new opportunities to dig deeper in terms of serving the people. That is the only reason I believe that we should even desire or develop a new term, is if we're going to do it for the purpose of more efficient ministry and more effective ministry. So for me, a worship pastor would have to be able to explain to the people what the difference is between having an experience and an encounter.
But a worship leader can do that.
Hold on. Now, see, there you go. A worship leader can do it, but a worship pastor instructs. A worship leader will show you, but a worship pastor will pick up the Bible and say, here is where it is. A worship leader will give you an example on the stage, but a worship pastor will meet you out in the foyer or in the parking lot and say, hey, the Lord really has a different level that he wants to take you to. Won't you come in? Won't you read these scriptures? Won't you take this journey? Won't you let me lead you through this journey as from a pastoral perspective? I think that really defines the difference between one and the other, because a lot of times the worship leader is only responsible for the song. They're not responsible for the growth and development of the individual.
So I think
that's really where it is. The pastor equals it's people. It's people.
Like who are you discipling?
People.
Right. Who are you discipling?
Go ahead, Forrest, and I got you.
No, I'm just gonna say, like, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like I think similar to what he's saying is a pastor, whether it be a worship pastor or whatever, he's going to disciple. Right. A worship leader can just get up and do whatever, just sing the songs, and he's great at leading the team. But at the end of the day, who is he discipling?
I mean, that's one of the key. I agree. That's the part. That's where I was going with what I was saying to Pastor Stevenson, was a worship leader can definitely teach that. But the problem is, like he said, the problem is that with worship leaders, when they teach, they done. It's like college. Sometimes in college, that you get up there and you have big old class, the professor teaches, and then you can't get a hold of them, and they just gone. That's the leader. The pastor would stay behind. The pastor makes sure there's a discipleship. So for the pastor, it's more about the people than it is, I'm using this as in quotes, than it is the performance. People before the performance. And so I think that's part. Go ahead, Pastor Cortez, you were saying something.
No, I was just saying, just to piggyback, right? Pastors operate in seed and growth, right? So I would compare it to this. A worship leader is a manager, right? Whatever the pastor says do, I'm gonna check off this list, check off this list, check off this list. I got my task done for the week, I'm good. But an actual pastor in any capacity of the church sees a seed in someone. They nurture that seed. They water that seed. They make sure, as Pastor Stevenson said, throughout the week, what's going on with you? How you doing? I didn't see you this week. Is everything all right? Can I pray with you? Even if they see someone slipping, I can't allow you. The other Sunday after service, I talked to the people about going back into an old school practice where I'm not going to let you fall. Back in the day, if the old folks saw somebody falling, and I've been Pentecostal for most of my life, and the old mothers and the elders, and they saw you slipping, they didn't see you and you were gone. They would come to your house to make sure, hey, what's going on with you? We miss you. We don't see you. What's happening? Can we help you get back on track? A pastor sees the seed, and the pastor wants to make sure that seed is growing, that is nurtured, that it gets enough light, that it's getting enough water, that is going to be the best possible worshiper that it can be. right? The best possible worshiper that it can be. That's where the term people like priests come from, right? Because as pastors, we want to set the example. We want to be the best pastor that we can be, so that we're producing the best disciples that can be produced, the best leaders that can be produced from us. You know, whoever we choose for a succession plan, we want to sow a seed in them and cultivate that seed so that we know that things, even in my absence, they're going to continue to grow and they're going to continue to flourish. So a worship pastor will want to develop a seed in someone, not just make sure that they do good on game day.
All right, good. Let's go to some of these questions because the people are writing up in this thing. All right. So there was a question way back, and it said from Jason Carter. It says, "Are worship leaders / pastors able to build their team even in a pandemic?" I would say yes, and I think that's based on the answer to this question is honestly based on the worship leader, who they are. It's based on the culture of the church. How the team operates and so forth. So I would say yes, although I'm not building my team right now. That's just personally not me. I can take some names, definitely, but I know how I build my team and everything. And building my team requires face-to-face interaction, a little bit more. I'm a lot more hands-on with building when it comes to building my team. So right now, I would say that yes, you can, as far as like taking names, everything, but just depending on where you are. Some of y'all might be able to do it. Some of y'all are doing rehearsals through Zoom. I can't do a rehearsal through Zoom with 47 people. I just can't do it. You know, so it just depends on where you are. In some other churches, I think you possibly could. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, I got to get to all these other, they will write something. All right, so there was a question. This is a good one for y'all pastors. Have you guys seen the video of Prophet Cain correcting the worship team during Facebook Live? Have y'all seen that video? Okay, so there was a video and they were singing John P. Key song, and they were singing and doing all this kind of stuff, and it was live and everything, and the band was playing. The band actually sounded good and everything. The singers kind of forgot the words. They were kind of fumbling. They were kind of messing everything up, and he corrected them. And he didn't just correct them. He corrected them and blasted them. Like, that's what y'all rehearsed? Y'all rehearsed that? That's what happens when y'all rehearse? That's kind of music. Maybe y'all shouldn't rehearse it. So the question was, would y'all correct the worship team like that during a Facebook Live? I would use Facebook Live. Would you correct the worship team like that during?
No. You correct privately.
Yeah.
And you edify publicly.
Right.
My pastor has always told me that.
I will say,
go ahead.
I will say that we got to pay attention to the words that are used, because in the context, you reveal, right? So this gentleman calls himself Prophet Brian Carn, okay? There's a difference between a pastor.
Oh, Lord, please don't bring up Brian Carn.
So watch this. He's a prophet. If you understand the makeup and personality and characteristic traits of a prophet, they say what comes to mind and there is no filter. So when you're talking about the examples that we're looking at, you got to look at these examples for the whole plain view of what is happening. Was it proper? It would not have been my way. As a musician, as a worship leader, I would have been some kind of feeling I'd have been in my skin. I've been in worship services where he's been there, and that has been his way of dealing with musicians for over 10 years. But that is something that comes along with him. That is a part of his personality. And when you call him to come to your church, you paying him money to act just like that, because guess what? Everybody is going to go back and watch that clip. Everybody's going to like it. And even we're going to sit here and talk about it. And that's what it did. It's a part of his personality. That's a part of his brand.
I totally, no disrespect, but I have to totally disagree with that. The question is, was it right? Or would we do it?
The question is, would you do it?
No, and I say no because God is a God of order, right? And just because you're a prophet, it doesn't give you the green light to just say whatever or embarrass somebody or speak out against somebody and make them feel a certain way publicly. So again, I think culture has something to do with that. Me personally, I would never do that.
But you have to say culture has something to do with that. His culture, it's acceptable.
Right. Yeah, no, I get it.
But I'm with you. I'll
refrain my
what do you think, Pastor Cortez?
I kind of stand on the fence. I think to the level, because when you said Brian Carn, I know what's going on. I didn't see the video, but right. I get it. When we talk about it, I can picture it, right? And so I think that some correction, light correction or adjustment, I wouldn't even say correction, but adjustment is okay publicly. When we look at Jesus Christ, there were sometimes when things were so simple, right? He would speak out of frustration and just say, "How long, do we have to do this? Y'all should know how to do this by now." But then when things were deeper, right? Like we talk about the boy who had a demon that would throw him to the ground, right? He simply just cast out the demon, and then he took them privately and taught them this kind only comes by fasting and prayer, right? So I think it's a case by case basis. If it's something that can be adjusted, there's a difference between an adjustment and a correction. And so sometimes we as leaders, we need to make adjustments for the sake of the body knowing how to transition forward. However, direct rebuke and, let me get you. I think that's step into my office. Let's do this. Let's have this conversation so I can make sure that that this is not the way to go, and that this is not how we do it. I will piggyback on Pastor Stevenson. When we're using examples and conversations with pastors, understand that every leader of the fivefold come with a different personality, right? Prophets all throughout the Word of God did not bite their tongue. They didn't bite their tongue. Whatever God said, God said. Whatever they felt about God said, they said. You understand what I'm saying? So sometimes prophets can come up and say, that's a hot mess. You shouldn't be, and God said that, whereas to a pastor, we're nurturers and we're cultivators. So we're more likely to pull you into the office, because the prophet, 9 times out of 10, when he's done, he's going to his next destination. The pastor, I have to stay there next Sunday and deal with whatever damage I produce from my mouth.
That's called Band-Aid ministry.
You know what?
That's called Band-Aid ministry. That's what you do after that. They came and tore your church up. You got to go back and use that balm of Gilead to fix it.
Yeah, and that's a key point as to why I talk to my people all the time, and I say, listen, I'm the pastor where if somebody get up and start saying God said, and they ain't looked at me first before saying God said, I'm gonna tell you, hold off. You can talk to me before you say anything over my people.
Yeah, I know one of the things that we've always done, at the Kingdom Church, where a prophet came in, he may have something to say, but you have to always consider the soul that you're speaking into. So if I know it's going to tear this person down to say it in front of a room of 1,000 people, I lean on the side that's wrong.
I don't care if it was a room, personally, I don't care if it was a room of 5 people.
Personally, what would happen at our church, if the prophet had something to say, he would take the mic from his mouth and whisper in your ear whatever he had to say. And I lean on the side of that, because even if it is something detrimental, right, or if it's something that maybe you've done, it's not everybody. Correction doesn't mean you have to be exposed to everybody. That's
something that's established through understanding what protocol and having a relationship. A lot of times, people are finding popular people to come into their church to grow a crowd, but at the end of the day, when they come and mess your stuff up, it takes you a little bit longer to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
So I don't know the full context of this video. Was this his church, and was that his team, or that wasn't his team? It wasn't his team? Man, let me restart this. Okay. I'm be honest with y'all. I told y'all, everybody has their own opinion and everything. I thought it was wrong. That's just my opinion. I thought it was wrong. And I honestly thought it was his team. Now that I even know that it wasn't his team, I don't care if I call myself a prophet. I'm not walking in somebody else's house.
Exactly.
I'm not coming to your house and be like, oh my God, y'all trash smell like doo-doo. I'm not doing that.
It reminded me of the 5 Heartbeats, where my man was over there playing the music wrong. And the guy was there and pushed him off the piano. It was just like,
it's my music, JT.
Yeah,
that's my music.
That's my music.
All right, that was a good one. Okay, so there was another question when we were talking about the worship leaders, worship pastors, and it said, is the title important? As very simple as this question is, I think it's actually a very good question to ask. Is the title important? Because I'm looking at it from a bunch of different ways and a bunch of different perspectives. But is the title important? I'm gonna ask y'all.
I'd say yes.
For me, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, I think when
you done, Forrest said yes.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I think when you say pastor, like, you know, you need to understand what the Bible says the role of a pastor is, right? And I think sometimes we just throw a title around. Oh, well, he's over there, so we're going to make him pastor over the children, or we're going to make him pastor over the leadership team. So it diminishes what the title is. So I think absolutely 100%. If I'm going to give you the title of a pastor, then you need to be operating in that role. I think the title does make a huge difference. But again, and I'll say this a million times, it goes back to the culture of the church that you're in and the leadership that you're under.
Cortez, what you got?
I say that it definitely makes a difference, and I want to also
so
say
it is
that,
important. It is important.
It is important. And the reason why I say it's important is because the weight of what you're calling yourself. We have to remember, right? We don't make each other pastors. God calls them, right? So when you declare pastorship, right, you're declaring a mantle, right? That you know you may not be ready for, right? When David goes to fight Goliath, I just preached about this in Ohio last weekend, right? When David goes to fight Goliath, he's standing before Saul, he's standing before the king, and the king offers him his armor. And David puts on the armor and realizes, this is too heavy for me. I haven't proved this, right? And so I think it's a dangerous thing to not understand and recognize what you are laying upon yourself. Because when you begin to, it's like opening up doors and portals that you're not ready to walk through, because you know your pastor deals with different attacks, different frustrations, different demons that you as a lay member or maybe a board member may not deal with, right? And so when you begin to take on certain things, it's like if I had a robe, I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna shut up. I had a robe. It was one of my favorite robes, black and white. Had it at the church. One day it went missing. Trying to figure out what happened to this robe. What happened to this robe? What happened to this robe? Well, someone had stolen the robe, and the next time I heard them preaching, they sounded like me. And all of a sudden, I started noticing their life started looking a lot like mine. And so when we start taking on things, right, we take on the weight of something because it sounds good or it looks good. And we don't recognize how heavy it really is, then we put ourselves in spiritual damage, right? We put our lives in spiritual damage. And when we start going into that, dealing with that spiritual damage, then it manifests on the outside. And then we wonder why the worship pastor came in good, but now they just battling all kind of nonsense and we don't know what's happening. And the worship team is a mess. Is because they're carrying the weight of something that they weren't ready for. So I think making a clear difference between a pastor and someone who's leading a team is very important, because that title makes a difference. If it didn't, it wouldn't be in the word.
I got you. What do you say, Pastor Stevenson?
You know, I always err to the unpopular remark. So here we go. I think that a lot of times we use titles to expand our ministry reach, and we also use titles for marketing. So if I know that I need the hottest worship leader to come to my church, Doc, you can come over here and you can be the worship pastor. You know what I'm saying? Ooh, they got a worship pastor over their church. Their church must be big. And then 15 members in the church, and 5 of the 15 members are pastors over something. And a lot of times,
man, talk about that, brother. Talk about that. Oh my God.
That people are senior pastors of churches, and in order for you to be a senior pastor, you must be the senior of some other pastors. So a lot of the titling that we're using in the churches are not causing us to be more effective in the body of Christ. It's causing more confusion, because now we're actually lowering the standards in a lot of ways, because we're not holding people to a level of responsibility. You got 10 pastors in your church, who's mentoring? You got 15 pastors in your church, who is making certain that, you know, that pastor is having good relationships with the individuals that they're covering. Because, you know, when you're a senior pastor, when you're a pastoral leader, and you give someone a title, they're operating under your authority. They're operating under what you've told them their context is. And if you're not mentoring a person to walk into that space, or if they've not already shown the fruit that they're already doing it before you give them a title, you're doing the body of Christ a disservice.
That's good.
And I want to say, because I'm sure there are some pastors and leaders on here, not just the people coming wanting the title, but as pastors and leaders, we are just as much to blame. As I said, a lot of y'all know the worship leader that we have, Minister Phyllis Wong. She sings everywhere, awards and all that stuff. When she came in, she was the director. She's the director of worship and music. You understand what I'm saying? Because as a pastor, I want to make sure that I'm not putting you in jeopardy, because at the end of the day, as a pastor, I am accountable for your soul. You understand what I'm saying? And if I just want to make it seem big to get more numbers, and I give you a title and you fall in that title, and I didn't check to see or verify to see if you were even ready for that weight, then at the end of the day, it falls back on me. Forget about the numbers. If you are preaching the word of God, if you are living the word of God, we are in a generation where people want authentic teaching and growth and development. The people that come to church for the music and the praise break, they're not going to last long anyway. I can guarantee you they're going to jump to somebody else's church in 6 months. But the church will grow, and people will come if you are authentically teaching and preaching and walking the word for them to get clear understanding, because the people are tired of poopers. The people are tired of coming and getting yogurt when they really needed a steak, to take them home and to laugh. You understand what I'm saying? So if you're doing what you're supposed to as a pastor, don't worry about throwing titles on people, because at the end of the day, if it's not what God said, then it's going to fall back on you as a senior pastor or the senior leader or the whatever you are, whatever title you feel or has been placed upon you in this season. It's going to fall back on you.
A worship pastor teaches rehearsal and tells you to go to Bible study.
Amen, somebody.
So the question that followed up to that is, and I think we're probably all going to be on the same page on this one, I'm praying. Really? Are all worship leaders called to be worship pastors? Called?
No.
There are some worship leaders who ain't called to be worship leaders.
Right. I was going to say it, but you said it first. So.
Listen,
that was not the unpopular opinion. That was not.
I was talking to one of my good brothers here in Clearwater, Florida, a while back, and we were talking about someone who was a member of a worship team, and the next week, all of a sudden, they had a flyer out and invite psalmist such and such to come and give you a worship experience, and we were just like, "What the what? You just got here? Like, what's going on? How are you a? Do you even know what a psalmist is? You ain't wrote not one lyric." To nobody's song. You can't even play an instrument, and now I don't understand what's going on. But that's no. And I want to say that it's okay to not be called to be a pastor.
That is it.
Okay.
That is it.
It is okay.
I agree.
To just be a worship leader. It is. There is nothing wrong with whatever capacity you are in this season. If you truly desire advancement, right? Because the Bible tells us to aspire for the higher of the gifts, right? So if you aspire it, right, be like Paul. Whatever state I'm in, I've learned to be content.
But what I'm finding out is that this pastor term draws people, especially right now with us being in a pandemic. People are looking for real pastors. Now, what I also find out is a lot of people who are using the term pastor repel people. They're not interested in trying to deal with the issues of the people. They're not interested in being a solution. They're not interested in getting the phone calls late at night. So if you're a worship pastor, I should be able to call you, and you should be able to lead me to a place of worship when I'm got a corona positive test coming from the hospital. But you're a pastor though, and if you're a pastor, then a pastor is known by the way they care for the sheep and tend to the sheep. But I'm not finding too many of those examples. I prefer to find somebody who has the heart and anointing to be a worship pastor, but don't want the title. I prefer to have somebody who's willing to do the work without all the accolades. Before you let the church, let the people give you a parking space before you ask for it.
I don't need it. I know what I'm called to do, and I just do it. Whether they call me, I remember when I got hired at Crossover Church in my interview, I remember the executive pastor saying, "Are you a worship pastor a worship leader? Because on my resume, the church that I had served at, my title was worship pastor. They had made me the worship pastor. And so they came in, and I came to Crossover, and they were like, well, here you the director of worship and creative arts. I said, that's what I am. I remember saying that. But I said, but here's my heart. And this is what I do as a worship leader. I said, this is what I do. This is the only way I know how to lead a worship ministry. Here's my heart. And I think that there need to be more worship leaders like you just said, being absolutely content in the state that they're in, being absolutely fine. If you never call me pastor, I'm fine. My calling is to lead people into the presence of God. And then even in those moments when we are in experiences, how can I make sure that the heartbeat of God gets to the people? How can I make sure that the heartbeat of God gets to the people? How do I make, and more than that, my biggest thing is, how in the world do I, as the leader at the front of this stage, make sure that the people don't see me?
Right.
How do I make sure that people who are looking on a stage to a guy in the front with a microphone do not see me? That is the most important part of leading worship for me. Don't look, don't see me. Who said that? That was on Tuesday. Bravis said it. Bravis said it on Tuesday because Miranda Curtis said, duck.
Duck, right. So you can
duck, so they see Jesus.
Yeah.
I was like, geez, duck so that people see Jesus. And that's the most important thing to me as a worship leader, is I never want the people to see me. I never want the people to see the worship team. They have to see Jesus.
Yep. I think that another thing that we need to consider is when we add highfalutin and blown up titles to our staffing structure, as a senior leader, that requires a shift in the paradigm of senior leadership as well. Adding another pastor, another pastoral role, you better be ready as a senior pastor to find out that somebody else is actively pastoring your membership, because a lot of senior pastors are asking for worship pastors, and then they find out this worship pastor is actually pastoring their people. They get in their feelings, but that's what you ask for. You ask for this person to develop the responsibility. You ask for this person to develop relationship, but then at the end of the day, you only want the people.
Isn't that a good thing? That's a blessing. Isn't that
hold on. I think
it's a blessing for a pastor.
It can be a blessing or a curse.
Gifts.
Right, but I think to your point, Pastor RJ.
That's one thing. But to help pastor, there's nothing wrong with helping to pastor. If you're especially in a church with a certain size where the pastor can't get to everybody.
But here's the thing, Darnel, and you know this because we've been on both sides, right? So like even the organization that I'm with, it's predominantly white, right? It is. I mean, but there's some black pastors there, but I think from the African-American context, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, right? I think it's more of an issue with African-Americans than it is with predominantly Caucasian leadership, right? Because we've seen in the African-American context, we see it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen on the other side. I'm not saying that, because it does. But I think we have seen it more so in the context of African-American churches, or predominantly African-American churches, where when we do, that's why you think most black churches will not, and I hate to say the word black churches, but y'all get what I'm saying, don't do small groups, right? There's a fear there. No, there's a fear there that says,
there are a lot of black churches that do not do small groups.
Right, and I'm telling you why.
That they all don't, but there are
there's a lot that don't, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because there's this threat or this fear that, hey, if I give Minister RJ a group of people, he's gonna go and try to start his own ministry. For the most part, I'm not saying every pastor is like that.
So let me clean up the muddy water.
Okay.
The small group model was a model that is found and has always been found in the doctrine and discipline of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. We called it the class leader system. The class leader system was taken and made into the Jethro principle or the tribal principle or cell group theory. It was something that came out of the tribal system because it is an African perspective to have a village who creates a nurturing society for people. It was actually a concept that came out of the Black church that the Black church doesn't use anymore. It was just like R&B music. The Beach Boys took all this Black R&B music, put their own faces on it, and it became popular for the white folks. That's what small groups are. But because it's something that we no longer appreciate it, we don't see that model being used in our churches, but it is in the fiber of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in any AME church you go to anywhere.
No, I'm aware of that. So this just FYI, I was aware that it was started by African Americans.
My classroom leader called me every week. You hear me? Every week they call me.
But why don't we do it?
You called me on that piano. You called me.
Why don't we?
But my question would be this: so why don't we do it? Because it is an effective method, right? But I think from what I've seen and heard, it's a fear. Okay, and I've heard this from African American pastors that pastor large churches. Like, I don't know, because this may happen or that may happen, right?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the structuring of a church. The AME church is quite different in this model in that all of their pastors are itinerant, meaning I only pastor at New St. Paul on an annually recurring, if maybe basis based on my Episcopal leadership. I don't get to this church and know that I'm gonna be here 5-10 years later. And because of that, in order to create strong fabric inside your church, the church is lay structured and not structured off of the clergy. That's the only way these churches.
Yeah,
that's not the denomination. That's not a non-denominational structure. That's not the way the Church of God in Christ is structured. That's not the way the Baptist church is structured. That was something that that was done in the AME church based on its church structure. I don't think it's a black and white thing. It does steer to the era of insecurity for leadership. It does steer to the era, but at the same extent, it goes back to mentoring. If you've not mentored the leaders in your church, then you don't know what they're gonna say. If you've not raised up the leaders that are operating in your church, you can imagine that Achan is in the camp, that somebody's gonna be in the camp who has the spirit of Absalom and pull people to the left or to the right and not akin themselves to the voice of the senior leader.
I was waiting for everybody to get done, and I was going to say, a lot of that goes back to insecurities within the leadership, right? Those that are afraid to do small groups and cell ministries is what we call in the Church of the Living God, cell ministries and all of that. Generally, it's because I'm afraid that you're going to take the people that I have, and it's an insecurity within. But if you pastor your pastors, if you know how to pastor your pastors, right, then all will be well. And if you stay on top of it, we look at Paul, right? Paul had, I don't know how many leaders under him, but whenever someone would start to go contrary, Paul would make a special visit. He would write a special letter and say, hey, let's get back in here. Let's get back on focus because this is the goal. The other thing is, I'm the type of leader, if you feel that God has called you to pastor, then I'm going to help you grow the pastorship. It's not my job to hoard you or harbor you. So if you begin a small group at your house, and the people that are coming to your house are people that you've invited to your house, and it's growing, then I'm going to pastor you to become a pastor. And I'm going to assist you and say, we want to help Minister RJ, Elder RJ, because he's doing great things right now. There are 25 people at his home. We want to help him transition because you should have, as a pastor, you should have open communication with your leaders to know who has aspirations for what anyway. There's a sermon by Marvin Winans. He does, I think it's at the 2014 Holy Convocation of his church. But in the lining of his sermon, he makes a point. He said, when you have people around you, it's an important question to ask them, what do you want? Right? What is it that you want from me? If you're here because you desire to become a pastor, then let's talk. That's not a bad thing. What's his name that died in a plane crash from the islands?
Miles Monroe.
Miles Monroe says, don't get upset when young leaders or new leaders come and they're doing great things. Don't get upset. Take the credit.
Yeah, but let's clarify that those are pastors. And let's just be honest where we are. There are a lot of people, a lot of pastors who are just not pastors. There are just some who are not pastors. But that, you make a great point. I'm gonna end this with two questions. because I forgot that I'm talking with 3 pastors and we can go a long time. I'm gonna end with 3 pastors, and I'm gonna end with these 2 questions because these are great questions that actually I have as well. And I think this should end with a bang. Jessica Jenkins wrote, if you don't have a worship pastor, who is going to teach the people how to worship?
Woo! The senior pastor of the church
Right,
always be the chief worship leader in the church.
I understand that.
Senior pastor of the church. The senior pastor from, watch this, Darnel, from doxology. All right, praise God from whom all blessings flow.
Got to remember, a bunch of churches don't do that.
That's fine. Whatever you use at the beginning of your worship experience, from the doxology, if the pastor has not told the people that what you are singing is our collective representation of who God is to us. It speaks of our doxos. It speaks to who we represent and appreciate God to be. And you allow people to be sucking on lemons. They don't want to stand. They don't want to sing the hymns. It's because the pastor has not taken the time to educate the people about God. It is.
I think that's where the question is. I'll say it. I'm gonna tell you straight up. Not everybody. Now, I'm gonna step out on a limb and say that you are very, very different. I know you. I watched your morning worship sessions, everything. You are a worshiper, sir. Okay, yeah. So there's a little bit of a difference with that. I'm going to step out on a limb and say we don't have enough pastors teaching on worship.
Because
I agree.
And when I say teaching on worship, the same way you get a series together and put this whole thing together, I don't see a bunch of senior pastors doing worship series.
You can't teach what you ain't been taught.
So I think that kind of goes to her point of, if you don't have a worship pastor, who's going to teach the people how to worship?
The pastor.
No, the pastor themselves.
My question is, as a senior pastor, because when you ask the question, that's why I said, I as a leader, as a senior leader, we should be the first example and the teacher of the purpose of praise, why we praise, why we worship, why we congregate. All of that stuff should flow first from you. If you are a pastor and you need a worship pastor to come and teach your people how to do what you should already be an example of, then we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how you are where you are.
I agree with that. And there are some pastors, I think they know it, but they don't teach it.
I don't think they know it. Because if they, watch this, this is what I know about worship. When you understand what worship is and you understand who you're worshiping, something on the inside of you as a creation responds to your creator. And if you've never been given that understanding, it is hard to duplicate or to present a concept that you don't know. That's why mentoring is important.
Yeah. But I don't think there's also anything. So you guys made a great point that a lot of pastors don't know. And I don't think it's that they can't be pastors. They don't know. If they don't know, and you know you can't teach on it, because I think a lot of it is that some of them just know they can't teach on it.
Well, that's like in professional careers, we have something called continuing education or professional development. Once you get your church and your keys and your steeple, you still need to find yourself under somebody's mentorship, learning in the areas that you don't know. There's so many pastors who not only don't know worship, but they don't know administration either.
You're right.
They can get the good book and they can preach, but the light bill don't never get paid. I mean, there's things that you have. There's things that you need to learn, and worship is definitely one of them.
I met some awesome senior pastors who have taught on worship. I'm like, that is it right there. Teach that to the people. But there's just so many of them that don't teach on work. They don't teach on worship. And I'm not just saying raise your hand. I'm talking go deep. When's the last time you did a message on prophetic worship?
So here is my issue. Here is my issue with it all, because worship is incorporated in your lifestyle. It should be incorporated. Yeah. And this is why I say, how can you be a pastor and not know what worship is, or even how to explain worship, when it should be a part of the fabric of your being?
I understand.
This is why I'm like, I don't know if it can be a continuing education thing, because if you are governing over a people and you can't even because there are some people who can teach by example, right? Because we've never done a worship series, but my people should know by watching my life, by watching my fellowship, by listening to my voice, by seeing what I do every day. They should understand at least the basic concepts of this is how I live in worship with God. This is how I live in constant connection and relationship, because worship is relationship and adoration. That's really what it is. Spiritual relationship and adoration to God, exalting God for who he is at all times, right? And so if you are not living that, and if that is not in your being, then as Pastor Stevenson said, how then can you teach on it? Deep calleth unto deep. If you don't have the depth of that in your life in general, I don't know how good a class or someone saying this is how you do this is going to do you if you're already pastoring. You might want to back up, like go back and do your first work over again, because you missed some of the modules that were necessary for you to get to where you are. And this is why I said earlier, it's important that God calls us to this thing and not man, because when God calls us, then we already have that spiritual connection and relationship to know, his voice. We already in relationship. We already in adoration with.
I agree with you. And I think that there are some pastors, obviously, who hear me when I say this and don't get upset with me when I say it. I think a lot of pastors talk about worship. I don't think they teach it.
Right, and I think
some pastors talk it and they say it's about, because this is all true. Everything you're saying, it's about relationship. It's about adoration. It's about this. Well, I'll be honest with you. You can say that and be done in 15 minutes. That don't mean you talk like you gave me a faith series. It's not the same. I think that there are some Siri just I said something to her. I think that there are a lot of pastors who just because we have a praise and worship experience feel like they don't need to teach on worship.
There you go.
Because we have the worship experience. So you should know. Hey, oh my God, he raised his hands. Come on, worship. And
it's an assumption.
So much more than that.
The way I learned how to use a key, the way I learn how to use a key in the door is by watching my daddy. Every now and then, he would tell me to go get his keys. And when he told me to go get his keys, I didn't need to read no instructions. I learned how to use a key in the door before I could read, because I watched my daddy's instructions. It's one thing to teach. It's one thing to preach. It's another thing to tell. But it's much easier for people to catch it when you do it. If I see you raising your hands, you ain't got to put out no course pack. You ain't got to have no series. Let me see you raise your hands. Let me see you by yourself before God. Let me see.
But raising your hands only gets you so far. What am I raising my hands for?
Right, but it's a start. So once I see you raise your hands.
I got the start. Listen, I got the start. I understand the start. I don't think we're going deep. I don't think the start is going deep enough.
Let me say this.
But it is going to instigate a conversation. Darnel, what are you doing on the stage when you got down on your knees and you were crying? Why were you crying in front of all these people?
What if I don't have that doesn't happen? What do I do on Monday when I can't see nobody?
Well, here's the thing. I think all pastors are not. I don't think it's fair to say that every pastor.
Oh, I'm definitely not saying every pastor.
I'm just saying in general, right? Like, so maybe my strength is apologetics, right? Maybe I know I understand worship, but maybe that's back to what Pastor RJ said, the whole continuing education piece, right? You never stop learning, you never stop evolving, because the Bible is always speaking. So there's always something that we can do better, right? So maybe I can't teach on that as well as I am at apologetics per se, right? But does that excuse me? No, because at that point, you're not teaching a holistic gospel. So I think we have to look at areas where we're weak, right? Not just worship, but just areas where we're weak. And we need to study those issues. But we're living in a time where pastors ain't studying. It's what's catchy, what phrase, you know what I'm saying? So cliche, right. So I agree, man. I think to some degree, there should be some kind of teaching on worship. And here it is. If you don't understand it, go learn it. If that's an area that you're weak in, go learn that area.
Or there's nothing wrong. And I think you guys were saying it before, like even the pastors, if you're not sure, you can still be the pastor. Go to a pastor who does. Go to a pastor who does understand it.
As a church planter, it is often an interesting task and process to develop culture in your church. What I used to do is I would find other churches that worshiped like I want to worship, and I would take my church over there so they could see an example of what it looked like. That way, I'm not just trying to be the only one that they see and they trying to figure out why. I want you to see what the atmosphere feels like. You don't understand why we're going to get here 30 minutes early for intercessory prayer? Let me take you over here to this church that does it, and you'll see the power of that process. It's like we don't have to be, we're supposed to be fitly and jointed together, but we're so isolated and separated and afraid to admit the fact that we don't know everything, that we cause the whole body not to grow. It's just as simple as if Darnel Butler is a bomb worship pastor over at Crossover, let's go over there and see what he's doing. It's just that simple.
I hear you. And I think I'm with you. Trust me, 100%. I hope you guys hear my heart when I say I'm 100% with you. I just think that it's time that we go deeper than just what I saw with my eyes. I mean, no offense. I can use my team as an example. My team came in, they knew how to lift their hands, they knew how to sing, they knew how to, you know what I'm saying? They could boo-hoo cry, they could do all this kind of stuff. And then if you go into a moment, I said it a few moments earlier, if you go into a moment of prophetic worship, they saw it. But what is prophetic worship? What does that mean? What does that look like? How did that happen? Why did you get prophetic and I didn't get it? I think that there comes a time where we have to go deeper with what we're more than what we're just seeing with the natural eyes. As much as my team can worship, we now have these things called chapel nights where we talk specifically about what happens. It's cool to have encounter, it's cool to have experience, but it's great to understand what happened in the encounter. It's great to understand what happened in the experience. I think that we're missing a little bit of that. We can talk about giving, but and as much as we've seen people give, no offense to some of these pastors, they're gonna give a 15-minute little sermon on giving every single Sunday on why we do it. I'm saying I think we need to use the same kind of concept with a lot of this stuff, because I think it's just hard. My son watches me worship. He's been watching me worship for 16 years. But until I have that conversation of this is what worship is. This is why I worship. This is why you have your own worship. This is how this is worship. In the Bible, this is called worship. But Dad, he didn't lift his hands. It doesn't matter. This is what I think we have to get to a point of where we are talking about that. And I don't think any of y'all are this whatsoever. But we still live in a day and age where the pastors don't come out until halfway through the worship, or some of them until worship's over. I don't think none of y'all like that, because I know I've seen lifestyles. I know your worship leader, Cortez, so I know you don't do that. You know what I'm saying? I just think that we are missing opportunities to really, now of course I'm passionate about it because that's what I do and everything, but I just think that we're missing opportunities to really teach the people about it. Not saying that we can't teach or we shouldn't teach on anything else. I don't think that we give worship the same priority as far as in-depth teaching as we do some of these other subjects. That's just my opinion. This was awesome conversation, guys. This was absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it was good, man.
Much needed. Much needed. I think the people got something off of it. Hey, guys, if you enjoyed all these pastors, put some hearts in there, put some thumbs in there. Pastors, I would ask that you guys put your ministries in the comments so they can follow, they can look, see who you guys are, put your Facebook pages on there. But this was awesome conversation. I think it was definitely needed. This was great. They can see us come together, talk about some stuff. And this is just the reality, guys, of church, of what Christian life is about and everything. At the end of the day, we're kingdom. This is kingdom building. This is kingdom connection. And that's what it's all about. So I appreciate you guys on that. Hope you guys got a lot of information out of here. Took some good notes and everything. You can always go back and watch the replay. Feel free to keep sharing the message and sharing the video as it goes out and everything. But I think this was absolutely awesome, absolutely necessary. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Tomorrow morning, we're here at 11 a.m. for Floodgate Friday. We're going to do some more worship. Tomorrow, somebody said, please do a part 2. This was good, man. This was good. I'm definitely gonna try to set something up, because I'd love to do when we all get back in buildings and we're and social distancing is not so much a problem anymore, I'd love to do something like this where we just have a huge panel and talk about this, because I think it's needed, it's necessary. And I wanted to do it definitely with pastors, because worship leaders can talk all day, but that role and that role and that relationship between the worship leader and the pastor, which we didn't even get into, is so vital. It's so crucial to do what we have to do. So I appreciate you, pastors, for taking this time out to talk with me and talk with the people. Really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Pastors, thank you guys so much. Everybody have a blessed and awesome Friday.
All right, man. Have a good one. Yep.